What's up, guys? It is Sam here, and today is a special day. We have the Twitter rankings, and we have my last day of work, so it is going to be a good video. So, what are the Twitter rankings? Well, we stack rank the candidates that are running for the Democratic nomination for president 1 through 10, based upon a couple different factors. We on their growth rate on Twitter, how quickly they're growing over 30 days, how many followers they've gained, because the growth rate tells one story, but the total number of followers tells another story, and the total number of tweets. So, with that being said, if this is your first time here, what's good? My name is Sam, and for those of you who are returning, it's good to freaking see you. Let's get into it. So what do I have here? I've got Social Blade. Social Blade is a social platform aggregator of the profiles on these platforms. So we've got Twitter here, and I just have pulled up Tom Steyer, his Twitter. And what they show us is the factors that we're using. So this is the total number of people that had followed him over the last 30 days. This is Tom Steyer. 2,560 people. The total number of tweets over the last 30 days is 272. And we look at the growth rate from 247,682 to 250, 384. And we see what the growth rate is. And we stack rank all the candidates on all three of these characters. Who has the highest amount of tweets, who's tweeting the most, meaning who's putting in the most amount of work, right? Because if you're tweeting 1,000 times a month and I'm tweeting 100 times a month, who do you think is going to do better on the platform? Just fucking common sense. And so that is one of the factors. The next is the total number of followers. This is the most important in my opinion, and we're going to get into the breakdown of how each one of these is in a moment. But we have the total number of followers that they've gained over the last 30 days, and we stack rank them. Whoever has the most to whoever has the least. And then the last one is the growth rate. And the growth rate is important, but I feel like it's more of a minor factor. So when you look at growth rates, if you have 1 million followers and you gain 10%, you gain 100,000 followers over a 30-day period on an annualized basis. Is tremendous, right? But what if I have 100,000 followers and I gain 20%, right? My 20%, I have a much higher growth rate. I have double your growth rate, but I've only gained 20,000 followers. Right? But which one is more impactful? Well, you get to decide, but I do think both of them tell an interesting story. So that's why they're both included. The total number of followers, in my opinion, and what we do here is substantially more important than the growth rate. Growth rate does tell an interesting story, right? Like if I'm growing twice as fast as you are, it's interesting, but you have fucking 10 times as many followers, right? If I have 100,000 and you have 1 million, you have 10 times as many followers. So we do look at both of them, and I took all of that data after we stack rank them each one of these factors, and I put it into a spreadsheet. And the top 5 candidates are Andrew Yang, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. That's the top 3 there. Then we have Joe Biden and Tulsi Gabbard. That rounds out the top 5. I'd like to know what your thoughts are down below in the comment section. If you use the hashtag STOLT, in the next section of the video, we do a Q&A where I get into my YouTube analytics and I search for the hashtag STOLT. And that allows me to pull up the comments that you guys leave in the comment section, which is awesome. First of all, it helps the channel out. Second of all, I think that the comments you guys leave are amazing and they're super insightful, a lot of them, so that other people can learn from them, right? With the things that you guys are saying and the point of view or just the perspective that I don't have, right, on certain things is valuable to certain people. So I think that I want to highlight these, and that's why we do this Q&A at the end of the videos. But let's dive into the numbers before we get into that. So as you can see here, we've done this ranking since September. And Yang has been number 1 across the board. He still continues to be number 1. But what's just kind of interesting, and this I want to point out before we dive in a little bit longer, or a little bit deeper, is if you look at this, Andrew Yang is tweeting more than twice as much as any other candidate. And we're also going to take a look at my profile on Social Blade. And if you want to jump over to Twitter and say what's up or get in a conversation, it's a little bit easier on Twitter. There's a link in the description for mine, but we're going to touch on that after the Q&A. So we see he's got 1,135 tweets over the last 30 days versus and you don't need to really pay attention. This is just over a 2-week period, but the total number of tweets for him versus everybody else is just dwarf. The closest people right here. Look at this. These are the next closest people, and they have 500 or less. He's at 1,100. So somebody's clearly putting in the work, based upon the knowledge and the authenticity that I've just kind of picked up a little bit on from paying attention to this kind of stuff. I don't think anybody's using a bot for a couple of different reasons. First of all, I don't think any one of them have that sophisticated of a social strategy. Second is that as soon as that comes to light, if they were using a bot, I think that would be way more detrimental than the impact it would have in terms of increasing the growth of their social. And I don't think any of them are taking social serious enough to realize that social is the thing, not like the polls, right? We're looking, the media reports on these polls, and if you actually take a look at any one of these polls, these are the national ones for Twitter here, but we do a national ranking, our power rankings, that have factors like this in it, but other social factors, their website ranking, their YouTube search volume in terms of who's searching the most out of all of Americans. Which candidate's searching for it the most? On a 12-month, a 3-month, and a 1-month. We do that on Google and we do it on YouTube to try to get a real understanding of what's happening versus like some poll that's 1,000 fucking people. Like, it just doesn't fucking make any sense that we like use that and report that as the collective like interest of America when it's, how is that even? And I've studied statistics for a long time, but there's so many biases in collecting that data and how it's sampled, like how you do the sampling, how you ask the questions, and you have there's a breakdown from each survey to like, right, if I do a survey, right, a poll, right, and then you do one, your structure, your sampling methods, the population that you sample is going to be different than the one I do, which could be good, could be bad, but you create more problems. So I want to understand the most authentic interest of the American public. That's why we do these things here. Let's see if we can notice any discernible trends here of like who's losing ground. So if we look, and I'm just comparing the month over month. So back in November, Pete was 5th and now he's 6th, so he's lost ground. Amy Klobuchar has moved up, which I don't think it really matters, but Biden has moved up 2 spots. That's kind of interesting. I've seen, so this is the second or third time that I've seen him starting to pick up interest. No, I'm curious to know what you guys think. But he's moved up 2 spots, and if you look at the state rankings for California or Iowa that we just put out, if you go back to the channel, you can look at them. But even in the state rankings, which the sampling size is much smaller because you're just looking at the search volume on Google and YouTube from a statewide basis, Joe Biden's also seen an uptick in interest just very recently. So I don't know if this is just because of like that shit that happened where he was calling somebody fat, or if this is something else, if this is a sustained amount of increase in attention associated with him or not. I'd like to know what your thoughts are down below in the comment section. Don't forget to use hashtag Stolt so that I can find the comment. Sometimes they get lost if you don't use hashtag Stolt. Elizabeth Warren has maintained her spot. Julian here has lost 1 spot, but you can see Julian's actually taking it serious. He's putting out 500 tweets a month. Pretty tremendous. But look at this. Check this out. Bernie Sanders is destroying it. Not only does he have the largest number of followers, I think he's around 10 million on Twitter, but he's also gaining it over a clip of 100,000 per month. That's a lot of new followers. The next closest person is Andrew Yang with 65,000, and then Joe Biden at 62,000. So, and then Warren down here, a little bit under 60. Tulsi down here, she's at 30. Pete's at 35, 36. So that's kind of interesting. Well, and then the last factor here is we have the growth rate. We see here that there's only a couple people that are growing like above 1%. We have Yang, which is just destroying the growth. Julian Castro, which is also destroying his growth. Julian Castro's got a very, very low base. I think Julian's probably around 250,000 followers. Yang's around 1 million followers. Pete might be around 2 million or something like that followers. So still on a monthly basis to be growing at more than 2% is pretty substantial, because if you annualize that, even if you just took 2% times 12, right, that's a 24% annualized growth rate, which is pretty substantial. And if you can maintain, like say, look at Castro or Tulsi or Yang, who are in like the 4, 5, and 6% growth rates on a monthly basis, if they were able to sustain this, even though Julian's got such a tiny, tiny little base, if he could sustain that or continue to get his message out to more people, he could potentially step up that growth rate. And if you compound that just over a couple months, it starts to get really, really big, especially when you're looking at some of these other candidates. I mean, Bernie's just like 10 million, right? 10 million versus 250,000 is a big difference. So Julian and some of these other candidates who are a lot smaller, like Julian, Tulsi is also really small. And these people need to be able to have their audience help them grow. I see this happening a lot with Andrew Yang, and the most amount of, let's say, memes or hashtags associated with it is with Andrew Yang. But we'll see how that plays out. And we can see that in the numbers, and that not only does he have the most amount of like support from other people, it appears from what my research on Twitter, but also that additional support from other people creating memes and just hashtags around him, that he's getting a lot of that ROI out of there, right? Like he's growing a lot faster than a lot of people. His growth relative to number 2, which is Julian, his growth rate is more than 1% greater, right? Basically 1.18% greater than the next closest in number 2 spot. And if you look at that, that's higher than like Bernie, Tom Steyer, you know, this person here. It's in the neighborhood of all of these. So just between first and second, he's in the neighborhood. And in terms of how far ahead he is, he's in the neighborhood of all those other characters in terms of the growth rate. But let's take a look at the breakdown, right? Because all these numbers are important, but how do we break this down? Well, first of all, we'll start with the growth rate. The growth rate in our score to come up with the overall ranking is 10%. Because the growth rate's interesting, right? But it's only one factor, right? If Andrew Yang's growing at 46%, well, 46% might be different potentially, but 46% versus Joe Biden, but he only has 64,000 new followers versus Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders, who's growing at 105,000, but only growing at 1%. You can see the magnitude of difference. Yes, you're growing at 45%, but you still get less followers than Bernie Sanders, even though he's only growing at 1%. So that's why we have the total number of followers over the last day represented by 60% of the average. So the total number of new followers, stack rank, that score, it represents 60% of our overall score. The last is the number of tweets, and that's 30%. Because if you look at this, we'll just take the top 4 people here. So the top 4 people, you can see it minus Joe Biden because he's not using a ton, it looks like. But so clearly the attention is coming from somewhere else. But the top 4 people are also gaining a lot of followers. So there's a correlation there. I didn't run a regression, but you can just see the data. And it would be interesting to see this over time. Maybe I will run a regression on this over time. I'd like to know what your thoughts are down below in the comment section. If you use the hashtag Stolt, as I mentioned, then when we get into our Q&A section, we pull up the YouTube analytics and I search for hashtag Stolt, and we can actually pull up your questions. So this first is from Assad TV. What's good, Assad? Thank you, brother. Watch my video. I think if you're trying to market, thank you so much for your support and for your comment. But if you're trying to get people to watch your video, I think there might be a potentially better way to market, in my opinion. Do you? Like, if that's working, cool, awesome. But I think potentially more thoughtful approach to the long term could potentially yield you better results to growing your channel if that's what you're trying to do. Although I did talk about it in this video, so that's, you got to win there, right? Crystal, what's good, Crystal? How about the other early states, South Carolina and Nevada? She is referencing the New Hampshire ranking video where we stack rank the candidates in New Hampshire to see who's actually winning, which is in the channel if you want to check it out. But I was asking for recommendations on other states to check out. So North Carolina and Nevada, we could definitely put something together for that. Today is the last day of work, as I mentioned. So anybody who does get anything out of these videos, please press that thumbs up button. I quit my job. I don't. The stuff I do online doesn't make. It's like 100 to 150 bucks a month. So I don't. That's not enough to support me yet. I have about 20-month runway. So if you guys do support the channel, if you support the message, share this video with somebody else only if you think they're going to get value on it. I don't want to waste your time and I don't want to waste their time. But if you think you know somebody who's going to get value out of this video, share with them. If you want to just help out the channel by pressing that thumbs up button, that helps out the channel because then YouTube sees that more people are liking it and they put this video in front of more people. And hopefully I can turn this into something before I run out of money. Next is RAM, and I have some super interesting ideas involving Tesla coming up, but stay tuned for that. Because that could be super freaking interesting. You are the dude. This is from RAM in reference to the California primary ranking video. By the way, California is super interesting because in that video we compare Real Clear Politics, which is aggregates all the polling data from the old way of doing things, and what we have here, and we can contrast the two of them to see who's actually right and where they go off by so much. So that's what this comment is in regards to. If you want to check it out, go back to the channel. But it's tough for me to not feel like your analysis holds some major ground, especially over these so-called polls. I agree on it. I honestly believe that what we're doing, or some derivative of like what we're doing, has the potential to be like how we do things in the next 10, 15 years. Like, it takes a while, from my experience, for people to actually change their beliefs. But in 20 years, I don't see us looking back and be like, oh, I'm so glad we stuck with this way. I think that there's going to be a paradigm shift where we try to find a more intelligent way of understanding what the collective of Americans are thinking and what the collective of Americans are actually interested in. I mentioned this in another video, but if you just Google actually, I pull it up really quick here. We're going to take a look at the Iowa caucuses on Wiki, right? And I'm just going to read you to what actually takes place for these, okay? So this is kind of interesting. And this is really one of the steps of the process to elect their president. Okay, so each precinct this is the Democratic Party process. Each precinct, and this is in regards to Iowa and the caucus that everybody likes to talk about, even though there's not a lot of delegates over there. Each precinct divides its delegate seats among the candidates in proportion to caucus goers' votes. Participants indicate their support for a particular candidate by standing in a designated area of a caucus site, forming a preference group. An area may also be designated for undecided participants, so at least we include them. Then for roughly 30 minutes, participants try to convince their neighbors to support each other. So basically, it's a potluck where we play musical chairs to decide who our fucking president is. I'm not making this up. Like, this is fucking real. This is actually how we fucking do shit here in this country. Like, and I'm sure, right? Like, I'm sure that there was a thoughtful consideration putting these rules in place, but the world's changed. It's a different place. Like, I don't think that's fucking necessary anymore. Let's get back into that real quick to get to another comment. Ram, I appreciate the support, and what's good on Twitter? Crystal, how you doing? Biden was reacting to the guy, pretty much calling him out in the sun. Criminals, as well as thinking about his sanity, questioning his sanity. Actually, I went through this comment yesterday in terms of Joe Biden's comment about like calling somebody out and fat, and I personally view that as like a negative thing, right? Like, why would I want that person running my country if they can't level up the conversation? It just, to me, right? It just shows how broke. And I'm not calling anybody out, like, to each their own, like, whatever. If you like Biden, I don't give a shit. Like, I'm just trying to understand what America thinks. But from my POV, if somebody's like not big enough inside, and there's something up here that allows them that like degrades the way that they think into like a lower level of like cognitive ability versus like leveling up the conversation all the time, to me, it is a negative thing. Like, I want somebody who's going to level up the conversation perpetually and not call somebody out for, like, oh, calling somebody fat or like challenging to somebody who's overweight to do a push-up contest. I mean, this is just such a, like, I don't know. I see it as negative, but Crystal brings up an awesome point that to a certain portion of the population, this could actually be a strength for him because they're like, oh, he's sticking up for his family. But I don't know. I think that there's my opinion, a more intelligent or thoughtful and productive way of doing that. This last one is from Star Trek Theory. What's good? Just search Amy Klobuchar swimsuit. Nothing there. Biden doesn't like swimsuits. I'm not sure what this is in regards to. I'm scared to click on this link while I am making a video because I don't want the video to get taken down if it's something inappropriate. But it is from U.S. News. I noticed you explain your method at the beginning of a lot of your videos. It's understandable why you do that, but maybe you can put a button with a timestamp to get to the data of returning viewers. Yes, you have an awesome point here. I will put together something like this and leave it in the comments. I've seen other people do this. I don't know how to do this, but today, as I mentioned, is my last day of work, so I will definitely figure out how to do this and put it in the comments to like what point of the video it gets into like the data and not the explanation portion of it. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, Star Trek, and I will definitely be doing that going forward. I appreciate everybody who does leave a comment. If you guys want to jump over to Twitter, let's get into my shit real quick. So this is my channel. Now I've had 600 tweets over the last 30 days. Not saying that's good or bad, but let's take a look here at the candidates, right? I've more than I would be number 2 in terms of the number of tweets. However, they actually have followers, and I don't. I have 600. Well, I mean, I do appreciate anybody who does follow me or supports me on, excuse me, on Twitter. I have 650 followers. So the total number of new followers I've gained is 188. So I would expect this to continue to go up because all of them have increased a tremendous amount. Although maybe potentially I could catch up to Tom Steyer potentially because I'm doing about 4 times as many tweets as him as time goes on. Although he's got a lot more money to spend on advertising, so that might be kind of interesting to see how that plays out. Anyways, I appreciate you guys. Peace.